Hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. We are going to be talking about how to develop a list, which I'm sure a lot of you, especially if you're juniors, are probably in the midst of doing that right now. And if you want to switch to the next slide. So I'm Lisa Bleich. I'm the CEO of College Bound Mentor. I have been involved with I've lived in Westfield for over 20 years. All of my kids went through the Westfield High School, so very familiar with it, and it was a great resource for them. And I've worked with students from all over New Jersey and really all over the world. And Stephanie joined about 6 years ago,
Oh wow,
5 years
yeah.
ago.
It's been a bit now. Yeah. It's been a bit. Also live in Westfield. I grew up in Westfield. Never thought I'd be back, but I'm very happy that I am. Yeah.
Great. All right, so just to get started, we want to talk about what we're going to go over today. So we're going to start off helping understand how do you determine your college criteria. We're going to go through some external forces that also go into making your choices for a college list. We're then going to go over some case studies of students who have actually gone through the process and how it worked out for them and how they came to their list. We're going to talk about how you can research colleges to find the fit that works well for you. And then finally, we're going to give you guys an opportunity for Q&A. If you have any questions as we're talking, then just go ahead and put them into the chat and we'll try to answer them as many questions. We'll try to answer all of the questions. All right, so let's go to the first slide. All right, so whenever we're working with students, we always like to start with their criteria so that they can understand what they're looking for in a college. And there's a lot of things that go into it. So the first is our microphones are echoing. Okay, well, that's a little technical difficulty. I'm not sure why that is.
Is that for
Uh,
everyone?
okay, how is that? Is that better? Okay, perfect. Good. I had it set up to the wrong one. So let's start up. Okay, well, we'll take two. Thank you. So thanks for letting me know. It's not better for you, Alyssa? Okay. Uh, we'll just keep going and hopefully it's good now. All right. So let's go through. So first of all, when you're putting together lists, it's really important that you understand your own criteria as a student or your kids, depending on who's listening here, kids, parents. And there's different ways that students are making decisions about that. So the first piece is the academic fit, the learning fit. So we always like students to think about how do they learn? Do they like discussion-based classes? Do they like large lecture classes? Do they like a combination? Is there a specific major that they know they want to study? And do they like, if it's engineering, do they want a more hands-on component to the engineering? Or even if it's something in business, do they like doing case studies or do they like doing projects? Do they like to write essays? Do they like to have conversations with people outside of the classroom? So really the academic and the learning fit is a really important component to start with. Then you move to the cultural fit. And so this is really just understanding the vibe of the college. And it's hard to do that when you're just doing virtual visits, but you can get some sense of that, particularly now with so many TikTok videos and social media. You can see the students that are there and what are the types of things that they're posting. But really, the best way is to go on campus and get a vibe check and see culturally, does it fit with what you're looking for? What types of people do you want to be around? What are some of the things that you want to take advantage of? Do you want a school that's got a big sports culture? Do you want a school that's got a big Greek culture? That's fraternities and sororities. Do you want a small liberal arts college where there's a very tight-knit community and a very strong cultural fit? Those are all the things that you have to think through before. A lot of times students will come in and say that they want, they want the big 10 schools or something like that. But then when you actually dig down a little bit deeper and they think about like the types of people they want to be around or the way that they like to learn, it often doesn't always align with what they think they want. So if you could start asking questions about this, that can make it really helpful. The next piece is the residential geographic fit. So really thinking through where do they want to be? Do they want to be in a large city, in a or a big campus in a small city, or a small campus in a big city? Do they want to be close to home, or do they want to be as far away from home as they possibly can get? Do you want a short flight, long flight, drive, train ride? All of those things come into consideration. And I think even more important is like, what's it like to get to campus? How it's like, are you going to be flying there and then you have a 2 hour bus ride to get to campus? Is it something that's easy to get back and forth? If the airport is very close to the campus, sometimes flying can be an easy thing to do. But other times with delays, etc., you may not want to have that hassle. Might be nice to be closer to home or an easy drive or an easy train ride. So those are all things. Also, just like what's the type of what do you want around you? Do you want a city? Do you want a college town? Do you want a rural area? Do you want to be by the beach? All of those things come into play when you're sort of putting out your must-haves, nice-to-haves, don't really care, and then don't really want. So it's good to put those and start thinking through that. And then some of the things will be flexible. You might change on that. The next piece is the extracurriculars activities fit. So if you're a really strong athlete and you want to play that sport in college, then if you're going to be a recruited athlete, obviously you have to make sure that it's a good match for you and that is something that you can be recruited for. If you just want to play it at the club level or you want to play it at the intramural level, then you want to make sure that that's something that is strong there. Do you want to be part of Greek life, joining fraternities or sororities? I have one of my students right now that I'm working on a list who's really interested in Indian dancing. So it's part of the Decide Dance Network. So schools that have teams that are in that, and that becomes a very strong social fit if you're really into perhaps you're into politics and you want to get involved in some of the political clubs on campus or speech and debate or anything extracurricularly that can sometimes drive, may not be the sole reason, but it's important if there's two schools that have the rest of the things, you want to make sure that they have those extracurricular activities like Formula One racing or things like that. Those are all extracurricular things you want to look for. Then the next piece is the student resources fit. So this is where you really want to get a sense of what do I need to be successful there? Do I need learning support? If so, what type of learning support do I need? Am I going to need some mental health support services? What's available on campus? Is it as many visits to a mental health professional as I need, or do they limit it to 7? How hard is it to get in to see whatever doctors or mental health professionals that you need? Is there if you have a strong religion preference and or you want to be actively involved and practicing your religion, what is that like on campus? How is that supporting it? If you want to go to graduate school, if you want to go to med school or you want to go to get a job on Wall Street or you want to go into something in the business, what's that going to do in terms of career advising, grad school support? Those are all things that are super important to look at when you're looking at the student resources and the fit and how easy it is to get access to those things. And then the final piece that you want to look at is the financial fit. And that's super important because every family has a budget for college, whatever that may be. And it's important to understand do you how does the school fit within that financial budget? Especially now that many of the private colleges can be $95,000 a year, it's very expensive. And so it's important to understand, first of all, do you qualify for financial aid? There's two types of financial aid. There's the need-based aid, which is based on a family's or a student's ability to pay, what the college determines, not necessarily what you may determine. And then also there's merit aid, and merit aid is based on where the student fits within the incoming class. And so it's important to know what that budget is and to recognize that depending on where you are in your budget, if you have a financial need or if you're going for merit aid, which are the schools that are going to meet that budget. And we always recommend that you have that conversation before you start putting the list together so that there will be different values that you place on schools. There may be some schools that you have a higher value that you're going to say, if you get in, whatever it is, we'll afford it. And you might even be able to afford any school, but you might make the decision that, you know what, we're not going to pay full freight for X school, but we might for Y school. And there's no judgment in that. It's just a family conversation to have to figure that out and then to be strategic in targeting schools that make sense for your budget.
Okay. So now Lisa just spoke about the student's preference in this college application process. So now we're going to talk about the university or the college's preference and what they're looking for in an applicant. So we created something called the college application wheel, and what we tried to do was to target all these different areas, what we think are it's not what we think, what's proven to be the different areas that are most important to a college or university when they're looking at an applicant. So I'll start just like a clock. I'll start at special talents. So a special talent could be dance. It could be a studio art. It could be an instrument, and it could really help with admissions. For example, I worked with two students who their dancing gifts really helped them get into Emory University in Atlanta. Emory is not known for their dance program. It's really strong, but at the time, a few years ago, they were really looking to amp their dance program up, and they really wanted excellent dancers to help do that. So these two students in particular, they're double majoring in dance, one in business and dance, one was in political science and dance. So it wasn't their major focus, but they really wanted, again, these excited, passionate dancers to help build up their program. Or maybe if you play a certain instrument, you're a tuba player. That year, the marching band is looking for a tuba player. So that's some ways that special talents could help an applicant. Athletics, Lisa kind of touched on this before. We're really looking at recruitment. When we're thinking about athletics, Division One and Division Three recruitment looks very different, but that's when you're talking with coaches. That's when they offer you a spot on their athletics team. Then there's intellectual curiosity. Intellectual curiosity, it's learning for the sake of learning. It's learning that transcends the classroom. So yes, it's studying for that biology test, and maybe you have that passion in biology, so you're really reading that book, that biology book with vigor. But what are you doing outside of the classroom that shows this passion in biology? Are you doing research? Are you doing peer tutoring for students who might struggle in biology? Are you doing an internship of some sort that has to relate to maybe you want to be pre-med in some way? Intellectual curiosity doesn't have to be quote unquote academic either. Maybe you have a passion for cooking and food and recipes, and this is what you think about all the time outside of your academics or other interests. So maybe it's building a blog or an Instagram page with recipes and making them, or having a company and sharing those recipes and baked goods with others. Institutional priorities are what the institution, what the college, what the university prioritizes. That can change from year to year. That can look like something like Villanova is a school that always says that they want kind students. They want that student who's gonna pick up the book that student dropped because that's what they want to do, not because someone's watching them do it. Institutional priority could be community service. A college like Tulane University is someone that means a lot to them when they look at an applicant. They want students who are highly engaged in service. Institutional priority that year could be they're looking for DEI for students who are diverse, however you define diversity, and that they're prioritizing equity and inclusion that year. So institutional priorities, again, can totally change by school and change from year to year, or even like University of Pennsylvania, they're a college that really values leadership and they value work experience. So speaking of leadership, we think of leadership and we automatically think, well, at least I don't want to speak for everyone. I used to think captain of the sports team or president or secretary of the club. Yes, that is leadership and that's awesome leadership. But leadership can also be that you're an amazing sibling, that you drive your sister to, I don't know, band practice or dance practice every day. Or maybe you have a sibling who have special needs and you really help take care of them while your parents are at work. Or it could be a job. You could, a waiter, waitress. That shows amazing leadership and how you navigate create a restaurant, or maybe you're the cashier at a local yogurt shop. So leadership can be shown in so many different ways. So I don't want anyone to feel intimidated that leadership just means that cliche version that I used to think and be intimidated by. Extracurricular activities are anything that you do outside the classroom. It could be in the school setting, like a sports team or a club in the school, student government. It could be something outside of school that you really care about, like coding, creating robots, club sport that you do outside of the classroom, internships like what I was speaking about before. So again, anything that you're excited about that shows a passion inside the school setting or outside of the school setting. Academic test scores. So objectively speaking, academics are going to be number one when a college is looking at an applicant. Yes, some of these other factors might win out in the end if you're a recruited athlete to a Division I college. But again, they want to see that you can handle the rigor of their college university. So that's why they are looking at academics first. And you are being looked at, the student, within the context of your own high school. Because it is not fair to compare Johnny or Sarah to a student at, so we'll just talk about Westfield High School because Lisa and I live here, and some of you or a lot of you have students or families in Westfield or at Westfield High School. But right, it's not fair to compare the Johnny or Sarah to a student at Scotch Plains Fanwood, to a private school in New Jersey, to a public school in California, or a school elsewhere. So colleges are going to look at you, again, with just in the context of your own high school. So they're going to see what courses that school offers. They're going to see the rigor that the school offers. If you're really interested in English, let's say, or writing, are you taking the most advanced English courses that the school has to offer? Or if you're interested in a business program, are you taking the highest level math courses? The same goes with engineering. And colleges will have access to something, it's called your high school profile. Most schools have that available. You can look that up, you can Google that. And that's the information that they will look at to see how you compare to to your peers and to the other students in your high school. Test scores, they're not making a comeback. They have made a comeback. We had a few interesting years when schools were test optional, but we have seen that they really do matter again. So that's another piece in this puzzle as well. Financial, that could look so many different ways. The financial piece. So if you're full pay, that could be really attractive to a college, especially if it's maybe it's a regional school and numbers aren't where they want them to be, and you're a full pay student. That's going to look really good to them. Or maybe there's a certain scholarship that you're a great candidate for. Maybe I was talking about with Emory with the dancers, and I had a dancer who fit this scholarship that they, again, were looking for dance students to really build up this awesome but smaller dance program that they have at Emory. Or maybe you are from a rural area and they're looking for that. Or maybe you're from the Ukraine, but maybe they only have a few scholarships they can give every year. So that's something else to think about as well. Character, community engagement. So that could be community service. Like what I said about Tulane, a school, and there's many other schools that value community service outside of Tulane. Character, they want good people. They want people also right now in a world that's very polarizing and where people are disagreeing. They want students who listen, who are empathetic, who are excited and willing to embrace disagreement in a respectful way and not back down from it. All right. So Lisa's going to talk about this lovely
Yeah.
Venn diagram.
Yeah, so this general. So really, when you're putting your list together, there is the student priorities, which you would go through and identify what you really want from a school. Then there's the college priorities, and that center in the middle is usually where you're going to have the best luck in terms of getting in. And that's where the fit is going to be for putting your list together. The only thing that you do have to consider is that there are external factors that also influence the decisions. And that is something that you don't have control over. But what you do have control over is identifying what your interests are, on all of those areas, where your strengths are, how you're going to contribute into a college community, and make that very clear to the colleges so that they understand exactly how they're going to shape the class with you in it. And then that's really where you want to put your list of schools together.
So before we get to the case studies, we just wanted to talk about a trend that we're seeing that's really impacting the way that we are helping students build their college lists. And this is a push to public universities and Southern universities, meaning that these schools are blowing up. They are becoming more popular than ever or have already blown up. And we're just going to try to explain how this impacts the way that someone's going to build a list. So we're seeing that students want a more quote unquote traditional college experience with less political strife. So that's a factor that's coming up with our students and families more and more. And a lot of times at public universities, we're not going to see that as much. Students want pre-professional programs like a separate business school or engineering school or educational school. And they want big sports, even if they're not an athlete, even if they don't think they're into sports, that builds a very special community, a tight-knit community where everyone comes together with this kind of rah-rah mentality. And usually a lot of these schools that really take pride in their sports have really strong alum networks and they want to take care of their own because they have this thing that unites everyone together. And public schools also, they often typically offer a greater return on investment or ROI. I feel like that's a buzzword lately because these schools are going to tend to be, well, usually, unless scholarships aren't involved, cheaper than private universities. Lisa mentioned that private universities are around $95,000 without scholarship right now. And then also at public schools, you have opportunities for honors college is or honors programs, which is an awesome way for a school to feel a little more tight knit, or for you to have access to things that you might not have access to at a maybe quote unquote more selective university. So these are just some reasons why they're becoming more popular. Um, so the key takeaways here are because public schools, even the traditionally less selective ones, um, are becoming so popular, they're becoming more competitive. Especially Southern schools have seen a crazy uptick in applications. So Westfield, right? Clemson, blowing up. A few years ago, I would say that it was a likely school. University of Tennessee at Knoxville, a likely school. I think it was out of state for UT Austin last year. It was about a 50% rise in applications for out of state. I think it was like 48%. Don't quote me on that. But that's crazy. That's huge. And a lot of schools are following suit. So again, have to rethink how we look at these schools. So need to consider them as a possible school or REIT school where, again, a few years ago, truly 5, 6 years ago, a lot of these schools were likely schools, or you're going to see we don't really use safety schools anymore, not to cause more stress. Don't worry when we talk about that. But we just can't see them as something as a guarantee and also because these schools are so popular, when you have 30 kids applying or more from a school to a UT to Austin or a Clemson or a Southern Methodist University or University of Georgia in the past 3 years, applications went up 30%. We have to rethink how we look at these schools. So what does a well-balanced list look like? So we use these 4 categories when we think of schools. It can be more nuanced, but for this, we'll just talk about it in these terms. So you should have about 1 to 2 likely schools. What makes a school a likely school? Like I said, we don't really refer to safety anymore, but that kind of goes under the same umbrella. A likely school is you look at your grades, you look at your test scores. There are other factors, but if your average, like if your grades and your test scores are above the average of that school, you should feel pretty good about getting into that school. Except there is the exception, and this is why we call them likelies. colleges are businesses. They need to manage enrollment, right? It looks really good if a school offers an acceptance and the student takes them. That's what they want. But if your profile is above the average profile or above the average student of a certain school, they might doubt that you're really interested in that college. Not always, but that can definitely be a factor. So that can result in a rejection, or that could also result in a wait list or a deferral to see if you're actually that serious about that school. So schools might use that again to manage enrollment. A target school is, and we say about 3 to 4. A target school is that school where you look at your profile, grades, GPA, again, other things that are important to the school, like institutional priorities, like maybe that school cares about leadership or community service or religious-based affiliation, or type like a Jesuit school and you're really involved in a church and you have leadership there, or if a school values something else. Anyway, so if you're in that range, you're in that like 50% range, that's going to be your target school. Possible school is, it could go either way, that maybe your grades are in the range, but your test scores aren't, or maybe your grades are a little low, your test scores are a little low, but you have incredible activities and leadership, and maybe that's going to weigh out that your test scores are a little low or that your grades are a little low. So it's possible, but we're not sure. And also for regular decision, those possibles really can become a reach. So that's why we say that for the best early decision outcome, you should really look at those possible schools. A reach 1 to 2. Usually, people don't agree with us on this and they add more reaches, but reaches is what it sounds like. It's something where you look at your profile and you are out of range for that school. All right. Oh,
And
so
you
yeah, go ahead,
I was
Lisa.
going to say, I was just going to say, so you could find, obviously, many of you probably know about the scattergrams, but the scattergrams are a good way to gauge where you would be within those categories. So a possible, like if there's some kids with your profile that got in, but not all of them got in, then that would be a possible school. So that's the way to see that. It's not like it's completely out of the range, but if nobody with your profile got in academically or test score wise, unless you're a recruited athlete and the coach at the admissions has already reviewed your application and said that you're admissible, the chances are of you getting in are very small to none. So that's the way to think about a reach.
Um, yeah, that's really helpful. So Lisa now is going to talk you through some case studies and how she helped create these lists for students, with all of this in mind that we just discussed, and some more. So,
Alyssa, just back to your question, we usually recommend 8 to 12 schools. That's what we recommend, but people always apply to more, and sometimes people apply to less. But since COVID, some people have been applying to upwards of 20 schools, which we think is too many, but we haven't been able to stop people from doing it. So we just kind of accept it. All right, so let's look at Varun. So Varun, I call him the basketball-loving, bi-coastal, analytical thinker. So he moved from New Jersey to California during high school, and he's got a 3.81 weighted GPA at his high school. That probably put him in maybe the top 40% of his high school. He had 9 honors AP classes. He had 1,300 on his SATs, but he had an upward trend in his grades. And that's something that's important to note because when students start off, some students may not start off as strong freshman year, then they get a little bit more momentum sophomore year, and then by junior year, they're really in a good place and they figured out how to study and how to do well. So they're going to look at those upward trends, and that's going to be a positive thing. That could also work in reverse if somebody starts off really high and then goes down, then that, of course, is a little bit more worrisome. But for Varun, he had an upward trend in his grades. He loved sports. He loved sports analytics in particular. He took a summer program, a pre-college class that was taught by a Michigan professor on sports analytics, and he really liked that whole side of the sports analytics and business. He was also interested in economics, and he wanted to study either the sports industry or business, like somehow combine those two together. Uh, In following his love of sports, he was the starting forward of his JV and varsity high school basketball team. He was also involved in travel basketball. He had a bit of a special talent. He played the saxophone in a jazz band, but it wasn't a huge piece of his way. Like he wasn't looking to include an art supplement or anything like that, but he enjoyed doing it. And then around beginning of his junior year, he realized that he needed to do some service, and so he ended up volunteering at a wheelchair basketball association, an organization that did wheelchair basketball. And it was really eye-opening for him because here he had been playing basketball and he thought, this is great. I'm going to just go. And how hard could it be to play basketball in a wheelchair? But it was really hard. And so he put himself in a completely different, uncomfortable environment. And he had to learn and got a very different perspective. And at first he was there and he was thought it would be somewhat easy. Then he saw how hard it was. And then as he really put his energy into it and got better at it, he started coaching the people that were doing it, became an assistant basketball coach. He also became a volunteer counselor for special needs camp, and he helped the food pantry. So he was able to develop a lot of leadership through his community service. So Varun's criteria for his must-haves, remember I talked about that at the beginning, was business. He also had somewhat of an interest in communications journalism. He liked math. He was also like statistical analysis. He thought he might want to do a co-op program. So a co-op program is where you would work for a semester instead of going to class. You are typically paid, you are paid to do that. And you usually like a school like a Northeastern or a Drexel has a very strong co-op program. And so it gives you some good work experience. He wanted a lot of class choices because he wasn't exactly sure which direction he was going to go when he first put his criteria together. He wanted big time athletics. That was really important for him because he was such a sports fan. He wanted good fitness facilities. He wanted a safe campus, a nice college town. He really liked modern facilities. That was something that was important to him. He wanted to have a good weekend life. He wanted strong academic and career advising and ability to get internships. As far as his next slide, no way. These are the things that he didn't want to join a service academy. Obviously, he didn't want a women-only college. He couldn't go there. He didn't want a super competitive environment. He didn't really thrive on pressure. He had a little bit, he would get a little bit anxious if there was too much pressure, and he didn't want a rural campus. All right. So for Varun, we wanted to identify schools that had a strong business, math, and data analytics programs because as he narrowed it down, that's what he really wanted to do. We wanted to look for schools that had strong sports management or opportunities to get experience in sports management. So if they had the Division I teams, he could perhaps do some internships or work for some of the teams. So that could help him with that. He also, again, this is why you want a lot of options. He wanted opportunities to maybe minor or be involved in journalism or kinesiology. We wanted to target schools where he could rise to the top academically and extracurricularly because that would be the best environment for him. He also has a twin brother, and so a lot of the schools needed to be compatible because they were both applying to many of the same schools. He was going to apply test optional for schools where he was not in the mid 50% range. So as Stephanie said, testing is definitely making a comeback, but there are still, I would say the majority of schools are still test optional. And so you can determine if the testing adds to your profile, then you want to submit them. And we've seen that particularly for certain majors like business, it does help to have a good test. But if they're not, then you could be better off applying test optional if your grades are strong. All right, so let's look at the next slide. So for Varun, this was our list. He was from California, and so he wanted to apply to the UCs, Berkeley, UCLA, UC, Santa Barbara. His dream school was University of Michigan, but we knew that was a reach, but his mom had gone there. He also liked University of Florida, mostly for their big sports and their business program. The possible schools, so these were schools where there were some kids with his profile had gotten in, but not everyone. So that's how we put it as the possible. Or Santa Clara, which is a Jesuit school out in the Northern California. University of Washington, Cal Poly, San Diego State. I put Indiana University Kelly. He applied last year, so this was the first year that they didn't have automatic admit, but the previous year you needed a 1380 to get a direct admit to Kelly. So while he had the GPA, you needed a 3.8 GPA and a 1380. He didn't have the SATs, so that's why we put it as a possible because he would have had to write an appeal. And then also University of Colorado Boulder, Leeds, the business school is quite competitive. So he could have, if he wasn't going for business, it would have been a target, but because he was going for business, it became impossible. And then his likely was Indiana non-business, Loyola Marymount. And then he had more safeties than likelies. He added, so we felt comfortable not having the 3 to 4 likelies because he added an extra to the safety. So it was Arizona State, University of Oregon, and San Jose State. All right. So these were the results. He ended up not getting into his reach schools. He got deferred from Michigan or postponed, then he got waitlisted, and then he got ultimately denied. He did get into Santa Clara, which was one of his possible schools. And interestingly, his twin brother did not. So that I don't was just kind of an interesting thing. He got waitlisted at University of Washington, and he did not get into Cal Poly or San Diego, and that's because they're very much numbers driven, and coming from California, it's harder to get in. He also got waitlisted and then ultimately did not get into Leeds, or I think he withdrew. So he got into Indiana, as we expected, as a pre-business student. He got into LMU Business, he got into Arizona State, University of Oregon, and San Jose State. So now we had this situation where he was like, all along he thought he was going to go to Kelly because or go to Indiana with the hope of getting into Kelly. But then he decided that during the process, he ended up getting into Arizona State Barrett Honors College. And that's a really strong honors college. It's an honors college that typically will accept B plus students and really put a lot of energy into them. So he went to visit it and he fell in love with the school and he thought it was like a really great opportunity for him to get a lot of personal attention and a lot of better opportunities than he might get going to Indiana as a pre-business student. So that's where he ended up going. And his brother actually ended up going there as well. And they both got into the honors college. So that was a nice way to think about the journey, that you can be really open to different ways to do it. And it really met all of his criteria. If you go back to it, it has all of the things that he was looking for. All right, let's look at the next case study. So here's Lena. So Lena is the women's rights activist future doctor. So Lena is a powerhouse student. So I'm just going to put that out there right now. She was the top 2% of her class, 21 AP honors classes, 15 60s SATs. So you think, okay, academically, there's really no school that is a true reach for her, really more of a wild card, to see whether or not she would get in. She needed financial aid. That was probably the most important part of her, even though it's small, but because she had everything else was so big, but she needed financial aid. That was a big part of her. She was very strong in community service. She was the Maasai Girls Fund executive board member, which is an organization in Africa for education. She was the Interact co-president, and they led a very successful food drive, which ended up leading to a Rotary Youth Leadership Award. She was a peer leader at her school. She was the student council treasurer, executive board member, and she was a tutor for multiple subjects. She was also very intellectually curious. She wanted to be a doctor. That's always what she wanted to do. She became an EMT, so that would also be part of service, but I put it under intellectual curiosity because she was really enthralled with what she was learning there. She did a training course the summer between junior and senior year, and then she ended up volunteering in for weekly 12-hour shifts. So she was very busy with that. She also won numerous academic awards, including Princeton Book Award and a Seal of Biliteracy for Chinese. She had a difficult family situation. Her parents were divorced. She spent the summers in Thailand, and it was a contentious divorce, I should say that. She speaks Thai and Chinese. So she really she just is a wonderful young woman. So let's see what her strategy was. We wanted to identify schools that had strong pre-med opportunities or or BSMD programs. So those are programs that are either accelerated programs, so it's 3 years of college and then you go directly into medical school, or they're early assurance programs. So you get in, you go for 4 years, and then you know that you're getting into med school there, provided that you get the correct MCAT score. We needed to identify schools that would be affordable, and this was an interesting situation that happens a lot with divorced families. So her dad's income was higher than her mom's income. There's two forms of financial aid. There's what I talked about before. There's need-based aid, and then there is merit aid. So need-based aid is calculated through the net price calculator but it's either through the FAFSA, which is the free application for student financial aid, or the CSS profile. Those are the two forms that determine what financial aid is. So for her, it's different because FAFSA calculates things differently than the CSS profile. So for the schools that were FAFSA only, which were some of the public schools, her student aid index was $28,000, which her mom could afford. If it was using both her father and her mother's income on the CSS profile, it was $95,000. So there was a big gap between what was her net price calculator for the private schools or the ones that use the CSS profile versus the ones that use FAFSA. So we had to be really strategic in how we did this because even though she did qualify for aid, it made it complicated because not all schools were going to calculate it in the same way. So we also wanted to highlight her intellectual curiosity in medicine, her community service, her leadership, her resiliency, her multicultural background in her application. So this was her list. We had a pretty big list for her because we didn't know how it was going to play out. And if you're doing something like a guaranteed admission program or an accelerated program, you typically have a broader list because you don't know how those are going to run. So our reach schools, both just sort of wild card schools, reach were UPenn, Duke, Columbia, and Dartmouth. And they were also potentially financial reaches because her CSS profile student aid index was so high. These were her possible schools. So I put them in here with the asterisks. So she had applied for many schools for those guaranteed programs. So getting into the college, I would have put like University of Pittsburgh, Penn State, TCNJ, I would have put as like probably safeties or likelies, right? But because she was applying to a special medical school program, I put them as possibles. So that's how that worked out. And then I put likelies for UNC Chapel Hill, UVA, BU, and then the safeties are Rutgers, Ohio State, and Maryland. She had mostly state schools on her application, but she had some of the private schools as well. And one just caveat: this year, University of Virginia took away the supplemental essays, and so their applications were up over 20, like 25%, 22%. So then it made it really hard to get in. This was the year before. So let's see what happens. All right. So this is what ended up happening. We can go to the next slide. So she got waitlisted at Penn, Dartmouth. She got denied from Duke, Columbia. She got waitlisted at Barnard. She ended up getting in pretty much everywhere else except Case Western. She applied to the BSMD program and she didn't get there. TCNJ, she made it to the interview round but didn't ultimately make it because it's such a small amount of people. Same thing with the University of Pittsburgh. She got into their honors college but didn't make it. She got an interview but didn't make it through. And Penn State, she made it into their honors college, which is one of the top honors colleges in the country. Really, really like it is similar to getting into an Ivy League in terms of its competitiveness. Then she got into UNC Chapel Hill, which was a school she always really liked. She became a finalist for their Robertson Scholarship, which is a full ride. She got into University of Virginia and BU, she got waitlisted, and that was probably an enrollment management play because they felt like she probably wouldn't come. And then she got into all of her safeties with money. So typically state universities, with the exception of UNC Chapel Hill and UVA, do not meet full need for out-of-state students. However, we're seeing a little bit more merit money from some of the larger public universities for their top students. So that's what we were going for. So does anyone want to guess where she ended up? You can just put it in the chat. See if anybody wants to guess here. See if anybody wants to guess. No? No guessers here? And you are right. Go to the next slide. She ended up going to UNC Chapel Hill and she's thrilled. She's like super happy that she's there and doing really well. She got into the honors college and they met her full need. So she ended up going for substantial less money and it was affordable. And since she wants to go to medical school, it makes a lot more sense for her to go there. All right, next case study. I have Catherine, the compassionate community leader, advocate, and dancer. So Catherine is also a really strong student, top 10% of her class, 12 AP honors classes, 1490 on her SAT. She was an AP scholar. She was very strong in dance. She competed on dance in 5 conventions per year, went to 5 conventions per year. She was a camp counselor for dance camps. She worked at the pool, as at the snack bar for 2 summers. Her biggest area was her community service. She had founded a One Love chapter at her high school, which is a program for really intimate partner violence, or just really developing good partnerships with intimate partners, good relationships. She organized a community-wide assembly with the CEO. She had first learned about it. She had visited a friend in a different state, and they had a very big chapter there. And she thought she didn't have any personal experience, thankfully, but she just thought it was a good organization. So she brought it to her high school. She was a peer leader. She coached basketball for kids with disabilities. She was a lector and a volunteer at church. So president of the Relay for Life, she did a lot of things in her community, and that was very important for her to be a big part of her community and her faith as well. So let's go to the next slide. So these were her must-haves. She, at the time when she did this, she thought she wanted business, economics, liberal arts. She wanted a lot of class choices. She wanted a residential campus. She wanted people to be friendly. She wanted access to professors, career advising. So these are all the things that she was looking for. Suburban campus. She didn't really want a liberal campus. She didn't really want a small college or women only. She didn't want to be far from home. She didn't really want an urban campus. So these are some of the things she didn't want. So for Catherine, we wanted to identify schools with strong psychology and business. So during the process, Catherine got really interested in psychology. She ended up doing a research project on a condition that she had, which was where you are very sensitive to noise. And she learned the psychology behind that and presented it. And it turns out her teacher had a similar condition. And so she started getting really interested in psychology, but she also was interested in business. So she was in some ways hedging her bets. She wanted a school that would really align with her values and emphasize community service, because that was so much a part of who she was. So we wanted to target schools where she could continue to be a leader in a comfortable environment. And for her, the fit was a lot more important than selectivity. So let's go to the next slide. So she had a pretty, narrow list, because she winnowed it down. She had her reach University of Virginia, her possibles Villanova and Richmond, Likely's Lehigh, Providence, Wake Forest. She was legacy there through her brother. And then her safeties were Fairfield, Indiana, and Scranton. But before we move forward, I just want to say she had visited Fairfield early on and loved the school. She loved everything about it. And then she kept visiting other schools to see if she, well, should I go to Villanova? Like, it's kind of similar. But at the end of the day, she really liked Fairfield. I mean, that was where she felt comfortable. That's where she knew she could have a lot of flexibility. She could study business. She could study psychology. There weren't going to be any issues for her wanting to change. And so she ended up applying. Early decision. She got in. She got $125,000 in merit money, and she's happy as a clam. And it was a very stress-free situation. So I wanted to just show you these different case studies, because it really can be, the process can be stressful and it can be not stressful. So a lot of it really depends on how you approach it and go into it.
So I know we're getting to the hour time limit, so I'm going to be a little speedy with the rest of these slides. So we think it's really important for you to understand how to research schools, because there's so many ways to learn about colleges and demonstrated interest, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So colleges have, especially since COVID, they've really amped up their virtual resources. So college websites have awesome access to virtual visits. This is Penn's, for example. You can move around. There's videos. So that's something you can look at. Emory. So Emory, I referenced before in Atlanta, they have an Oxford campus. What is it, like 30, 45
Welcome
minutes?
to Penn.
Oh,
My name
sorry.
is Kareem. I'm from Cairo, Egypt, and I'm a student in the Management and
me,
Technology program.
Oh,
I'm studying.
I was like,
hold
what's going
on.
on?
Oh boy, hold on.
I'll be one of your tour guides today. Before we
Okay. All right. Anyway, you can see how thorough that is. All
There
right.
it
I
is.
don't need to go through the Emory one. Another way to show demonstrated interest. So I'll explain what demonstrated interest is. It's what it sounds like. It's you showing the college that you care, that you're interested. And and to a lot of colleges, demonstrated interest matters. They consider it. For example, Lehigh University, it's about an hour away from us, right? In Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. That is very important to them. Demonstrated interest can be viewed in a lot of different ways. Yes, it could be a tour. So if you live an on-campus tour. So if you live in New Jersey and you're about an hour away, they might expect a visit to campus because that's something that is accessible versus someone who lives in California, who's applying to Lehigh, they might expect more of a virtual visit or to sign up for a info session. A high school visit is also a great example of a way to show demonstrated interest, or if they don't come visit your high school. So senior year in the fall time, so many colleges and representatives, and you can sign up, will come visit. If a college that you're interested in doesn't come, you can do a regional visit. So maybe they'll have a get together in New York City or somewhere more central in New Jersey. Schools like Lehigh, or so many schools that care about demonstrated interest, they will track that. Reading your emails, they will track that. Or you can email your regional admission representative. Social media, sometimes they track if you start following like their Instagram page or even TikTok. There's all these amazing guidebooks too. And this is also not just for demonstrated interest, because plenty of schools don't track, especially public universities. Most of them don't track demonstrated interest. These are just also ways to learn about more schools, because the research element is so important, whether it's in person or virtually or just old school looking at the FIS guide, which Lisa and we still love reading that book and learning about schools. Certain application platforms like at Westfield, they switched to Score or Naviance for different application overlaps, and they have so many resources that a lot of us aren't even aware of to dig deep into schools. AI, pains us that we're saying this with caveats, but if you find those good prompts, because if you just do Google and you look at a school and you see what comes up, most of that information is wrong. We'll tell you right now that is misinformation. But if you are good with AI and you know the right prompts and you know how to dig deeper, fine, go AI. But yeah, I don't even want to go there. Okay, so many other resources are also available on our website. So these are like all these websites that you can look at that you could just spend hours and hours on looking at. Okay. Oh, Lisa's going to talk about this. This is, yeah, I think
Yeah,
this
I'm going
is
to talk
super
about this, but
helpful too.
I realize that
Yeah.
we're close to time,
Yeah.
so I wanted to just open it up to questions and answers. So you tell me, would you want me to go through researching outcomes, or do you want to go through questions and answers? Let me know what people want to do. You want to just like put a thumbs up if you want to just put a question in the chat
Because we have 5
if you have
minutes
a
left.
question. Yes. Outcomes. Okay. Let's see. I like the site too for comparing. Yeah, college scorecard. That's a good one. Thank you. All right, so I'll go through outcomes. All right, so one of the things that's also super important is, okay, you're going to college, you want to have fun, you want to find your people, you want to get your major, but at the end of the day, you also want to get a job, get into graduate school, you want to have an outcome. So I think that's also something that people don't, a lot of times you'll go and look at US News and World Report list, or you'll look at like the top schools in XYZ, but you also have to look at the outcomes, and you've got to dig a little bit deeper if you're going to get into the outcomes. So I work with a lot of students who are pre-med. So that's just an example here. So let's look at 3 schools. So Muhlenberg is a small liberal arts college about an hour away. Yale is Yale. And then Rutgers is our state university in New Jersey. So let's say you're interested in pre-med. So somebody might think, oh, I have to go to Yale to get into medical school. But let's look at the outcomes for each of those schools. And I think Stephanie has that. So if we look at the pre-med outcomes for Muhlenberg, it's known for being really strong with medical school. So 90% acceptance rate to medical school, 92% acceptance rate to dental school. So pretty good outcomes. One of the things that I would want to maybe go a little bit deeper if we look at the Yale pre-med outcomes is how did that break down by acceptance rate in terms of their MCAT score and their GPA, because that is also something that you would want to ask. And I work with a lot of pre-med students going into medical school, and this is pretty consistent. For medical school, it's about your MCAT score and your GPA. And so you could see that this is really playing out at Yale. You know, not 100% acceptance rate into medical school, but it's overall, it's, you know, 88%, 79%, 79% with a 3.4 to 3.59. There weren't as many kids that were applying in that, but you can compare those outcomes. And then let's look at Rutgers just to see as another example of what would be the outcomes for. So here we have 2024, how many students applied? So for DOs, 91% got in, 78% got in for MD. So on Muhlenberg, it actually looks like it's a higher overall acceptance rate than either one of those schools in total. And so I think that's important to note, because it's not everything is not just based on US News and World Report. Because if you're going to do really well in school, some kids might do better at a school like Muhlenberg, where it's a small school, they'll get a lot of attention from professors, and they'll really be able to get really high grades so that they can get into medical school. The other thing you want to look at now, which I know is super important, is like career outcomes. So if we look at that, if we go back to the
Cool.
Muhlenberg career outcomes, oh, is that one working or not? Let's see. So the Career Center will typically tell you how many people are enrolled within 6 months of graduation. So 93%. So that's pretty high. You know, that's very high. 93% within, sorry about that. So that's also something that you want to look at. Now, when you're visiting the school, you might want to get more of a sense of where are they actually going to. Now let's look at Yale and see the difference there. So the 4-year look, this is telling us, and this gives you a lot more information, because you can see what are their top employers, what is it by year, what is it by major. So when you look at these things, you can just Google career outcome or career scorecard, and you can find this level of information. So that's another thing that you want to dig a little bit deeper into when you're looking at outcomes. All right.
All right.
Any
Should I
other? All right, let's look at, yeah. So,
Ooh, speedy. All right. Okay. So back to college visits, virtual or in person, again, whatever works best for you. This is a great way, like I said before. I thought we were done, so I'll talk demonstrated interest. It's the best way to show demonstrated interest. It's a college visit. It can be virtual, it could be in person, whatever works best, but do it, because you really need to get the vibe of a school, and you can't do that without digging in deeper, without doing the virtual visit, without doing the in-person visit, without talking to people. And that's a way that you're going to be able to figure out what you like about a campus, what you don't like about a campus. I have plenty of students who just trusted their gut, who took the time to do a virtual info session, to do the virtual tours, and they were right. They just like had this sense, and they were like, you know what, I'll do the visit just in case. And usually they were right. So if you really do the virtual visits the right way, or the virtual info sessions, and you dig in deep, they can be super effective. It will help you understand your needs better, and it will help you understand the school within the context of your needs, your wants, fit, all of that good stuff. And the other thing, we'll end with this, and there's going to be a lot of repetition, but keep in mind these things we talk about, especially if you are looking at specific programs. For example, engineering is super popular. You want to look at the quality of the facilities. You're going to be spending a lot of time in labs. Is this a place that you want to spend a lot of time with? How's the technology? Is there money being put into these specific programs? Is it more hands-on? Is it more about theory or theoretical based? Are you accepted into a specific major as a freshman? So some schools you might get to it might be more exploratory, and you might get an introduction to electrical engineering and mechanical engineering. Or some schools from day one you start off in that major, and you don't really have that time to explore and figure out what you want to focus on. The criteria, this is super important. Lisa mentioned this before. This is for engineering schools and business schools. Leeds, the business school at Colorado is a perfect example because the criteria for getting into an engineering school or the criteria for getting into a business school is usually a lot more competitive than arts and sciences or the school in general. So you might see a certain acceptance rate for University of Colorado at Boulder, and you're like, oh, I'm in there, my grades are there, my test scores are there, but usually they don't advertise that it's a lot more competitive, or they might not share the specific scores for the engineering school or for the business school. So really make sure that you look at that. And then she also spoke about co-ops, like certain like internships, are those available? Business, it's apply what I said about engineering to business because they're also most competitive, usually looking at STEMs, really looking at maths grades and scores. Lisa also spoke about Kelly with direct admit. They changed it this year, but is that program direct admit? Do you start in the business school right away, or do you apply after freshman or sophomore year, like at schools like UVA or Ohio State or UC Berkeley? You apply after freshman or sophomore year, so you don't start it in the business school. Okay. Oh,
Berkeley's now
yeah.
direct admit.
Yeah.
Berkeley is now direct admit, but they just switched this year, so
Yes.
it's
Sorry.
hard to
Yeah.
keep track. So that's why it's good to just know all of these things because it's a moving target a lot of times.
All right. Have a
All
good
right,
night,
you guys.
everyone.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye bye.